Hello, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this week's Artist Bookhouse Evanston Bound series, a Corin Tour and Artist Talk. This week we are featuring Ken Gerleve. If you would like more information about his work, please visit www.kennethgerleve.com, and I hope you enjoy today's session. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. Is it raining down there in Chicago?
It is raining. I think it might not be raining right now, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of a dreary day up here in Evanston, which is not so very far from you. One of the things I wanted to talk with you about, because you're here today and you are Ken, and you have a skull above your head right back there. Several things, actually. We've got a lot to cover, but one thing that I'm wondering is how your, well, why don't you start with your background of how you came to the book arts and what led you to this path of shifting your work from just narrative writing and book structures to moving into animation and such. So that's two questions. So first question, how did you come to the book arts?
So I came to the book arts basically sort of via a circuitous route. When I was a kid, my sort of first exposure to art was really through illustrated books. And in particular, I was a huge fan of the books by John Bellers. There was a series, one of them being House with a Clock in Its Walls. The Curse of the Blue Figurine was another one. And they were all illustrated by Edward Gorey. And so fairly early on, I was introduced to Edward Gorey's work. And so as I progressed sort of through high school and into early college, I started to collect his works. And I was really struck by the way he was able to kind of create a story, write the story, illustrate it, even sort of write out the typography. And so he kind of had control over the entire thing. And I loved those books. Then I started working at Borders Bookstore, and I was there for several years. And so I had this love of books. I was working around books all the time. And I kind of had this idea in the back of my mind that I wanted to have some kind of, job in the publishing industry or somewhere adjacent to that. And then at one point I started working for a marketing company, and I eventually moved into their publishing area and started doing layouts for books and publications for them. And so it was sort of like merging the two together, the bookseller aspect and then making the books. And at the time I was still pursuing my own artwork. I have a bachelor's degree from UIC in studio arts with a focus in painting. But living in small apartments wasn't really conducive to painting oil paints. And I had also done a lot of sculpture, but it was very difficult to do sculpture as well, particularly the kinds of sculpture I'd done before. So I started to think, well, maybe this book thing is something I should pursue. And I also worked for a brief period of time at the Paper Source in Chicago on Franklin Avenue, and sort of started to meet other people who were working with paper and books. And so it was sort of even more made apparent to me that this was a thing I could be doing. So I took a class at Columbia College Center for Book and Paper, in their cheap bookbinding class. And at that point I was hooked. I applied for the graduate program and started in 2006, I believe, and graduated in 2009. I went to work for Lotte Reiniger, the artist and author, who is also our board president and founder of Artist Bookhouse. And I've worked for her ever since 2011. And I've worked on layouts and mock-ups and things like that for her books. I've done printing, etchings for her, and box making and bookbinding and a whole bunch of different things, framing. So I'm still using those skills, but as time progresses, I've been doing more and more work on the website and things like that. I also got to kind of work with other areas that I was interested in. One in particular was animation, and I've always been interested in puppetry, so animation was kind of like an easy sort of ancillary route to that. But so I did some animations for Audrey's website. I've done animations for my own things, and recently for the past 4 years, I've been working with the Ragdale Foundation on their Rags to Witches event, which is a Halloween event. It's a family-friendly, art-centric event, and we invite a bunch of different artists to come out and basically take over the campus, decorate it. We have performers and music and food and a bunch of different things. And I've been part of the team that has set that up for the past 4 years. So it's been great. And one of the things that we did for that was my partner and I, Todd Summer, we created like a little series called Strange Tales. And it included these little puppets, which I'll bring out one right here.
I love him.
So this is Fizbert. And Fizbert, hello, he has a very sort of pompous British accent, though he's not British, so we don't know where the accent came from. But in any case, so we wrote stories and performed them at Ragdale for this. And in I think it was the third year, I decided that I would do an animation, a little animated short with these characters. And then in the fourth year, we did the same, but it was a little bit different. So it's just been kind of, working with narrative is really sort of the core of what I do in my own work. And so I think really the media kind of follows suit. So whatever I need for that particular project is what I pursue, whether it's, sculpture, animation, puppetry, and, sewing, building things out of puppets or out of foam and fleece, doing stop motion stuff, building little sets. And that's kind of what I'm currently working on. Is I'm working on a project that I've been working on for years called Summerland, which is a ghost story. And it will be a serialized Gothic mystery. And so I'm working in different formats for each volume of that. And some will just be text-based, some will have interesting structures or imagery, some will have animation, some might be an installation. So I'm working through all these different ways of telling stories from on the page and to the environment that we're in. So do you that's basically it.
Yeah. So do you feel like the story as a narrative, the story itself leads to these different iterations and sort of overlaps, but it's at the core, it's the story, and the storytelling is telling you how to tell the story? Is that kind of what you're saying? Or is it kind of like, as you're making the puppets, do you then think, oh wait, this also needs to be animation, or oh wait, this also needs to be an artist book, or oh wait, this is an installation as well? Or does it kind of shape its way from the narrative itself, I guess is my question.
I think in many of the smaller projects I've done, like the Strange Tales for Ragdale, and some of the other things that I've done, it's really sort of what is required of the project. With the Summerland project, I kind of pinched off a little bit of that idea and worked on my thesis project, which again I'll show pictures of. But really, the Summerland project has followed me since. So I had part of the narrative I did as an installation at the Loyola University Museum of Art when they had their Edward Gorey exhibition there a few years ago. Other parts of it I'm developing into actual interactive performative pieces that might be like a dinner theater type of thing. And then right now I'm actually working on the book itself. So I've been doing all these things kind of around the book all these years, and now I'm starting to get back to actually making this book. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. But.
Oh no, that did answer my question, because it's kind of the whole Summerland idea of how the story and the narrative changes between pieces of how you're presenting it. That's I love how you explained that. So now you say you're working on the book structure itself, or the pieces itself, for the physicality, the physical things. Is that sort of the idea of working on those? That's sort of kind of like we're stuck in this artist residency period because we're all stuck at home, that you are focusing on that more than you had been pre-COVID? Or can you talk a little bit about how your process is during COVID and lockdown? Are you able to work? Are you kind of, you're working on those things, so it's kind of, that's your focus? I also have to mention to everyone that Ken is the one who's gets the videos and then is sent just raw footage from our videos and has to then piece it together and put it on the YouTube channel. So he's working on that as well as other things. So thank you for that. But yeah, so is it a function of COVID that you now have this time to work on these pieces, or is it kind of like that was in your plan calendar year goal of the year to do?
Well, so I actually had a residency at Ragdale back at the beginning of March, so the very beginning of March, and we were supposed to be there through, I think, like the 18th or 20th of March. And so basically for the first week or so, I was gung-ho on getting this project started. It's a project that I've been working on incrementally over years and years, as I said, and I was finally going to sit down and work some things out and start working on building a structure and completing the text. I've written, so it's kind of gone through this weird phase. I've written sort of narrative text that's like a novel, and it was a really hard thing for me to do because I'm a visual artist. I'm not really a writer in the sense that it's something that feels natural to me. It's something that I can do, but it's not something that I enjoy. So I was finding it really difficult to keep up the momentum of writing, a 300 or 400 page novel about these stories. And really, when I thought back to it, I was like, well, the whole reason why I went into the Book Arts and Center for Book and Paper, their program in particular, is because I wanted to make these kind of weird hybrid books, or things that kind of question what books were. And so it really kind of made me think, well, I need to go back to that original idea that I had, which was, pared down text, image heavy, changing these different, the different permutations of the story, because that's where I felt engaged with the project. And it's funny because with every other project I work on, I usually have a deadline and I get through the thing and I do a huge amount of work. And then I move on to the next project. But with this, it's always sort of like fits and starts, and a lot of sort of, second guessing. And I don't know if it's going to be that project in my life that does that. But in any case, so I was going to work on this during the residency, and then COVID-19 happened, and everybody started panicking during the residency, and a lot of people started leaving early. And at one point we were told that we could stay through the end of the residency, but it just seemed a little bit like we weren't really, following what was going on in the outside world. It was like we were sort of like sequestered in. And I think a lot of the staff were concerned, even though they didn't, make it known to us. I felt that they were concerned. And so we decided we would go home early. So we left like a week early, basically. And decided we would just continue working on our project at home. And then lockdown happened, or the stay-at-home order. So since then, I found myself with a lot of extra time where I'm not traveling back and forth, and I've been focused on working on these projects, or on this particular project. So in terms of how COVID-19 has changed anything, it seems like, if anything, it's just removed the other distractions in life that would have kept me from doing things. I'm still working. I still work for Audrey. I'm working a lot on stuff for Artist Book House, and that's primarily my focus there. But with all this extra time, I mean, we don't have social, we're not going out and seeing people, we're not going out to dinner, not going grocery shopping, none of it. We're just staying in the house. So there's a lot of downtime. So that's why I'm working on it now.
Yeah, so you have your own private ragdale in your basement.
If only we had Linda here to cook for us.
I know. Oh my God.
Then it would be perfect. But
Then it would be perfect.
yeah.
Do you wanna show your video of your animation of my favorite character, Fizbert?
Sure.
Or what do you want to do? What do you want to show us, Ken?
Well, I'll show you guys the animation since we're talking about it here.
One fateful Halloween many years ago, in the sleepy old town of Curious Hollow, Fizbert, Rufus, and Susie, 3 feline siblings, inherited a shop full of curious things. Their mother, Mama Curious, disappeared without a trace. It was now up to them to take care of the place. Nearby, Professor Granouille Crapeau rested for a time with his wife, the shriveled sea witch, Alkalina Brine.
I'll get revenge on Mama Curious if it's the last thing I do. I'll punish that wretched cat for dehydrating you. Do not fear, my love. You'll soon be back on top. I'll retrieve your magic mirror from her cursed shop.
The cats discovered oddities everywhere they looked. Mama Curious had even left them a dusty old book. But feeling quite hungry, they planned to eat dinner first. Little did they know, all of the objects were cursed! Fizbert and Rufus were quite lazy, alas.
I say, this chair is simply first class.
Now you've got it. Perhaps a quick nap?
Keep your paws off this stuff until I get back.
The brothers were awakened from a restful slumber at the arrival of a frantic amphibian customer.
I must have the mirror. It's terribly urgent. I'll pay you this much and not another cent.
When Susie returned, she was on the alert, and she was quite suspicious of Rufus and Fizbert.
I'm back, lazy brothers. What have you been doing?
Nothing, of course, except innocently snoozing.
We must beware of a sea witch and a sinister toad.
Tuna, please. And for dessert, apple pie a la mode. Akalina, my dear, I know what you are thinking. No, I wasn't out cavorting and drinking. Now wait just a minute and give me a chance. I've got a surprise that will revive our romance. But look closely. Your future will soon become clearer. I managed to buy back your magical mirror.
The mirror revealed Alkalina's true face. The spell had stolen her beauty and grace.
Gadzooks! I declare this portrait is possessed.
It's time to put your superstitions to rest.
Then finally, yes, finally, Susie picked up the book and suffered a shock when she took a close look. The book from Mama Curious confirmed all their fears. None of the objects were as they appeared.
Okay, I admit, these objects are cursed.
Egads, a situation couldn't get any worse.
Calm down, they're all here, collected and caught.
Or at least, that's what she thought. Meanwhile, Alkalina was starting to stir. Her throat began to click and whir. She croaked out a whisper as if in pain.
Abracadabra, let there be rain.
Susie discovered after a close look, they were missing the 13th object from the book. She questioned her brothers until they confessed. They sold the cursed mirror to the toad. What a mess. The cats all felt their spirits sink. Susie wondered what Mama Curious would think.
Hello, my darlings. Use your noggins. You know what to do. Okay, Susie, maybe just you.
Of course! The flyer said Crapeau would be at the fair. We'll find him and break the curse of the mirror there.
I'm sick of being trapped in this shriveled state. I want my revenge, and I will not wait. Minions, come forth and heed my decree. Bring those flea-ridden kittens to
Patience,
me.
my dear. Let's not be too hasty.
Silence, you toad! How dare you interrupt me?
With all the magic bestowed upon me by the darkness of the seven seas.
Susie leapt through the air with panache. She swiped the mirror from the witch in a flash. She zapped the two creeps and their carnival folk. They all disappeared in a cloud of smoke. All was well. The trouble had stopped. The mirror was safely returned to the shop. One fateful Halloween many years ago, in the sleepy old town of Curious Hollow, Thisbert, Rufus, and Susie, three curious siblings, saved everyone from evil, accursed things.
So I love the sort of the wallpaper in that room that it sort of reflects the eyes on the witch. When you can see her actual self. So you said that was for the Ragdale Rags to Witches, but I'm curious, and I know a lot of our viewers are curious and participants are curious, where the heck do your monster ideas come from? Do you have nightmares every night or what? Where is this coming from?
So I don't know. I think it's all, you know, from childhood on, it's always been kind of a weird interest in the macabre. My birthday's in October, and I always had Halloween birthdays, and I really just was always into that kind of weird stuff. So for a long time, I guess I kind of felt a little guilty in indulging in it. And at some point, I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna go with it because it's clear. It's
no guilt.
It's never gonna go away. So
yeah, no, and I love that it's so tied into your existence as a person because it's your birthday month. It's creepy, and it's perfect that you are participating in this group that throws rags to witches every year. It's just perfect for you. When is Rags to Witches usually is in October, but how are you guys framing it this year? I know you've already had some meetings, but are you thinking it's going to happen live or are you thinking it's going to be online?
So as of right now, we don't really know. Our committee is still talking about it a little bit. We have met previous to COVID-19, and we were not sure then whether it was going to happen this year because Ragdale is building a new dance studio. And so one of the main buildings that we would use would be probably a pit at that point. We did talk about ways of kind of dealing with that. And so I think right now we're sort of in a holding pattern like everyone else. But one thing we have been discussing is doing some kind of version of like a sort of a ghost hunter mystery thing on Zoom or some platform like that to kind of still engage people and have like an event, but maybe be able to do it entirely online. And it would probably feature the Ragdale house, you know, in sort of the virtual backgrounds and things like that so that we could all be present. But we really haven't decided yet. And I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a minute. I want to see some more work because also I have to mention to everyone that when you and I had started to talk about your visit for Evanston Bound, one of the things we threw back and forth was you wearing one of your puppet heads.
Oh, yeah.
And as your face to begin. We didn't do that, but can you show us some more work? Maybe one of those puppet heads, or are those upstairs still?
They are upstairs, but I could get them. They're not very far.
No. Let's stay focused. Maybe show us some of the things that you have prepped to show us. So I'm going to mute myself, and you can have the floor, so to speak.
Okay. So share this here. Okay, so so this is just stuff from my website, and here, of course, are the Strange Tales characters as they were originally drawn. Here's me making them in the studio. So these are the heads, actually. These are the big masks that we wore here, and these are the puppet heads. So they were made from the same patterns, just made larger, so that they matched. Of course, that's the title for that. Here is the Rufus puppet sitting in it. We made these giant chairs, and there's actually like a slit in the back, and it's made with foam, so a puppeteer could reach their hand through. So the cats could look like they were sitting in these chairs having a conversation with each other. There's an original drawing of Granui Crepeau. You can probably guess who inspired his hair. This was a map that we made I made for the Rags to Witches event. Here are the original cat dolls that I made years ago that we sort of resurrected for the project. I just made these for fun. So it was kind of, it's been a long time working on that project, but here's the image I did for the Rags to Witches event. You can see that there. This is a show that I had that was called As Above, So Below. It mostly had paper cuts. So paper cuts are another thing that I do quite a lot of. These are boxes that contain tunnel books. So inside and I can show you what the inside looks like in a moment, but so basically there's like a light inside and a little layered drawing. I don't know if you can see the other screen here if I'm highlighted, but I'll show that in a minute. This is a piece that I did. These are sort of like little viewfinder boxes with tunnel books inside them and a little story. So there's 4 panels. These were all laser cut that I designed. And then there was a light on the table. So the light would show through the bottom of the box, and there was stained glass panels in there. So it gave it like an interesting color. This is something that I'm pretty well known for. I designed this paper cut for Gory-esque, which was a website that my partner and I started around the same time that I did the Summerland show at Luma for the Gory exhibition. And it was a site that invited artists and writers to submit work that was inspired by Edward Gorey. So that still exists. If anybody's interested in checking it out, it's goryesque.com. But anyway, this is all cut paper. It doesn't show up quite as well here. I think I maybe have another version of it. But it's sort of dimensional, so you're seeing some of the shadows coming through it. A lot of my work deals with spiritualism and magic. So here's a piece that I made. I made another piece that was sold at the Dieudonné auction a few years ago that Amy had something to do with. Here's the image, just flat. This one's called Homunculus, and it's another cut paper piece. There it is, flat. This was Eccles telescoping spirit trumpet. So the spiritualists used to use all sorts of weird devices during their seances, and one of them was the spirit trumpet, which basically allowed them to throw their voices around the room. So it sounded like ghosts were coming from different directions. This piece is called Drones, and it's a bunch of, I have a close-up here, of eyes of providence in clouds that are sort of watching everyone. And there's some more shots of that. Ghostly Companions was a little book that I made at Columbia, and there's just a couple of images of this, but I have a tendency to write everything in verse, and I really, for some reason, enjoy that. So that's essentially what I'm doing with the Summerland project that I'm working on now, is that it's all being rewritten in verse from the novel version. And it will have illustrations, and will utilize elements of tunnel books and carousel books as well. So there's just some of that. This was my thesis piece. It's called Haunted. It was, I believe, 14 by 18 feet. These are all separate cut paper panels that were arranged in this sort of grid to create this giant thing. And it was the idea of a picture book. So there are 32 main pages in the story, and you kind of stand in the middle of the spread, if you will. And behind each one of these panels, there were little flickering LED candles, and they were backed with vellum, so it kind of gave this weird moody glow, like you were, in a kind of a twilight lit forest or whatever. So here's some close-ups of that. The story is about Sebastian, who was bullied because he was queer. So this story is really about identity and sort of being gay and bullied at school and things like that, and then sort of finding one's voice and strength in that, and to be able to kind of persevere. So part of that was shown at Columbia in the Weissman show. Here's a couple of panels from it that are just flat scans. And then I've done some work for Zola, which is a e-book publishing distribution company. They've kind of changed their focus since then, but I did a series of book covers for their ebooks. So I'll just show a few of those. These were all cut paper, but then I manipulated them in Photoshop with, and colored them and whatnot. The idea was to have kind of a suite that looked like they went together, but kind of looked handmade, even though they're kind of also, they're a hybrid. So that one doesn't show up too well.
So Ben is asking for those. Is everything hand cut that you do when you're making these paper cuts? And what kind of paper are you using for that?
So yes, everything has been cut by hand. I have made some additioned pieces that were based on original cut pieces, but then I used like a plotter cutter to cut out the addition. So, where I have lots of duplicates of the same thing, like the drones piece, for instance, I cut one of those out and then made a cutting file and cut them. But these are all done, these were all done by hand, and they were pieced together and kind of colored and, like, as I said, manipulated. So,
and the paper that you're using, is it handmade or?
No, this is, so I tend to use black paper. I think it's like either Strathmore or Canson black. I've used like nicer paper before, but it tends to not keep a sharp enough edge. And for the piece that I did with my thesis piece, that was all just large sheets that came off of a pad that I cut down and then cut each individual page. So I think that's the end of those. So I will go back to, oops, stop sharing.
So Ben mentioned also in the chat, beautiful illustrations.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'm back to me, right? I can't tell what everybody's saying here. So yeah, I mean, I do a lot of, I feel like a lot of my work has some kind of affinity with the theater and like the proscenium, but not really necessarily, I mean, more recently with the performance aspect, but there's something about that idea of like an enclosed space that has like a diorama or a scene in it that is intriguing to me. And so it's a motif that's kind of reappeared in my work over time. As I said, I mentioned, this is one of those tunnel books, so you can see the layers. These are the ones that go inside the boxes that are lit up, the little red box and whatnot. I'm gonna switch to this other camera if I can. Hopefully this will work. Okay. So these are some of the things that I've been working on now while I've been on this little mini residency.
Yeah, let me pin that, and okay. spotlight that for everyone. Okay, now just let me know when you want to go out of the hands, and I'll unspotlight your hands.
Okay. So so I've been working through different ideas of how to both illustrate this new book project, the newest iteration of this book project, and how then I can also use that to reproduce it. So I'm currently building these sort of model sets that are 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. And I'll show you one of those models here. And basically the model will sort of reflect the final object, but it won't be exactly the same. So, so I don't know if you can see this here. This is one that I built at Ragdale when I was there. And in the story, it's primarily a story about a house, and the house has rounded corners. So all of the corners are rounded, and what that means is that ghosts can't get stuck inside the corners. So so basically, I worked on that kind of original idea, and then I moved to another version. This is matte board and paper. So I'm moving to the paper stage. This is that Canson or whatever it is, black paper. Maybe it's Strathmore. And as you can see, I'm cutting out elements like a window here, which you can see. So the idea is to build these little sets and then to people them with little characters and furniture and things like that, and photograph them, and then use that as the basis for making the illustrations that go into the book. So once that's completed, I've been working on these different ideas for how to turn that into the actual book. And so one of the ideas is to do sort of a big book with a rounded back that would sort of reflect the rounding in the model. And then I would have these little panels that would sort of open up. And here, this one would be sort of like a carousel structure. I haven't quite figured out this bottom yet. But then I moved from that one to kind of figuring out, okay, well, if I did something that was a little bit less structure, you know, sort of less involved, I could build something that would be, you know, sort of more simple. So this one obviously doesn't have a rounded corner. So that's that I had to kind of like work through. So this is the latest version. It's a little bit flimsier because I used a lighter paper, but it has the rounded corner in the back, and it's able to fold up into itself. So basically, what I'm thinking of is that the spreads will basically kind of open flat like that, and you'll see a scene, and then you'll move to the next one and see the scene. So, so I'm still working on that. And then one of the other things I've been working on is building three-dimensional, sort of almost like stop motion puppet characters to people these scenes. And so this is a model I was making. It's made out of Fimo clay. The head is actually hollow. I have some foam stuffed in there. I don't know if you can see that. But I'm doing replaceable mouths with magnets. So this is just a test piece, but this is the magnet. So I can change the mouth shapes. These eyebrows are metallic, and there's magnets embedded in the head. So when these are done, they'll be able to kind of like move up and down. Surprise, or, you know, anger or whatever. So that's a little bit over the top. I imagine they'll probably look a little bit more like this guy here, who I just made. This is one of the things I've made while I've been on my, you know, forced COVID-19 thing. Again, it's made out of Fimo. He has glow-in-the-dark eyes, and he's just sort of like a ghostly figure popping out of the thing.
I sort of love how he looks like one of those trophies on a wall in an old creepy library, but instead of a big moose, he's a scary ghost guy.
Scary ghost. Yeah, he's a scary ghosty. So so I've been using this time to kind of you know, really work through some of these things that I never get to work on, or don't have a lot of time to work on. And it's been fruitful in that regard.
So are these pages, are you thinking this is going to be one book, or are you using the book as a background for the stop motion, or is it an edition of books that are going to then be put out to the world? What's the thought on that right now at this point?
So with this particular, this project that I'm working on here with these pages and the sets is for one thread of the narrative. There are 3 main narrative threads that kind of interweave, and they're at different time periods. So the background of the story is that it's this house that was built by spiritualists to communicate with the dead, and so like one of the narrative pieces is from the early 1900s, another piece is from around the 1970s and 80s, and then the third piece is from the present. And so I'm starting with the third piece first, because it's about one of the characters who inherits this house after his uncle dies. And in the middle narrative, the one that's in the 70s and 80s, we see him as a child. So it's sort of him coming back to this house that he hasn't visited since he was a child. And so in this particular piece, my idea is to sort of do these sets. It really focuses on the house and this group of people who have come together for a memorial service. And so that will be one book. I think probably the one that's set in the 70s, 80s period will be a different style of binding, different approach to the illustration. Similar, it'll be the same characters or some of the same characters in the same story, the same setup. So it'll feel related, but sort of more like a cousin than like a sibling. And then the third book that's sort of way in the 1900s, that piece I have already adapted. That was the piece that I did at Luma. And so my intention is to redo that piece as well as a book, but it will again have a different structure and a different kind of look and feel about it. So I'm sort of working my way backwards, really.
Yeah, going back through time.
Yeah. And then there are some other pieces that I've made that are kind of ancillary to that have like maybe a spin-off of a character. There's a character named Pris Agilewood who is she's sort of a new age guru who has her own kind of church that's kind of based on spiritualism, but is also just kind of wacky and out there. And so she's in 2 of the books, and so there's a spin-off about her adventures when she was for a short time in a goth band in the late 70s, early 80s. She had a one-hit wonder. And so that story will be about her, and we'll probably incorporate some sort of fake music that we create, but that will sound kind of like a goth new wave band from the 80s. So
I love that. I love that.
So that one will probably come out as like it'll look like an LP, with like a gatefold, and then you can read the text in it and actually listen to it somehow. I'll have to figure that out one.
Yeah, but right now you're working on the present day or current tale.
Right.
So how far do you say you are in the process? 10%, 40%, or where are you?
I would say that because I've been working all over these 3 different narratives, I've kind of been writing all of it at the same time. And I've really only recently kind of tried to prise them apart again and make them kind of their own separate projects. Because I know enough now that of how they relate to each other and how these characters work and everything, that I can kind of start to pinch pieces off and separate them. So this particular story, I started rewriting the text. I'd say I'm probably about 50% of the way, turning the sort of novel that I'd been working on in the outline and everything into verse. And I think maybe right now I'm at like 14 pages or something of verse. So I imagine this sort of feel like a Shel Silverstein or maybe Edward Gorey style book where it's like really limited chunks of text or like a page of text with an image.
Yeah.
And then as far as the imagery and everything, I've done a lot of research and kind of concepting, but I haven't yet started doing the photographing and the set building and everything. I'm just sort of working through the structures. Yeah, part of the reason why I think I think part of the reason why I'm doing this three-dimensionally is because I kind of think three-dimensionally. That's one of the reasons why I like bookbinding, is because it's kind of, you know, they're objects that you can hold, and sort of, you know, using my hands to create things like that seems much more intuitive to me than even drawing. I mean, I like to draw, but when you have to draw, this is something I've recognized working with Audrey's husband on From Hell, is that From Hell is a huge graphic novel, over 500 pages, and there are 9 panels per page. So if you have to draw the same characters over and over and over again, like after a while it could either be really horrific, or, you know, like it's just difficult to kind of make sure that everybody looks the same throughout an entire work. So one of the reasons why I like to build these models is that I can use them as drawing reference, essentially. I just wanted to point out too, I had this on my table and I forgot to show you guys. This is the Fizbert bust that I made originally. He's resin cast, made to look sort of, he sits on a library shelf, you know, looking very, very regal. So
yeah, Fizbert, my favorite.
Fizbert. He's actually based on our cat Fizgig.
Fizgig.
But yeah, Fizgig is named after a character in The Dark Crystal.
Oh.
And because that is probably a copyrighted character, we thought we probably couldn't use that.
Yeah, you
for
need
this character, you know.
You can pay homage, but then make him sound even more fake British by adding on there.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ken. Do you have anything more that you want to show us? We have about 6 minutes left. And does anybody have any questions they want to drop into the chat? Now's the time. So what else did you want to show us? Because I remember there was something else, I think. No? Yes?
Oh, I did have, actually, I was going to just show some of the bookbinding stuff here. As working for Audrey, I've done some different projects, bookbinding and whatnot, which might be more interesting to some people. So can you guys see that? Okay.
Yes, you've got the Raven Girl.
So this was, Raven Girl was a ballet that Audrey, she collaborated with Wayne McGregor on this project. She wrote a story and illustrated it. He turned it into a ballet. I worked on printing the etchings. I helped make the plates. We had like a 12-week period over the summer where we were just up at the North Shore Art League making plates all day long. And then taking as many prints off of them as we could to send them to the publisher. So after this was completed, we took the prints and we made this portfolio with the box. And so I designed the whole thing. We printed, Audrey and I printed these sort of the wrap, these wings, and this little label here. And so I'll just show how that works. So these are some of the prints from it. So I cut all these little matte windows, and all of the prints were just slightly different sizes. Some of these are hand coloring on top of the aquatint that we did.
What was the edition size for this?
These boxes we only did, I believe, 6, and I have one. Audrey has one, the Newberry Library has one, the National Museum of Women in the Arts has one, and Wayne McGregor has one, or the Royal Opera House, I'm not sure what, I think it's Wayne McGregor. And I'm not sure, I think the last one maybe, I think Audrey's gallerist, former gallerist has it. It was sort of a big thank you for everybody who was involved.
Yeah.
So when you remove the book, or the portfolio, you get to this little cutout tray that had the commercially printed book in it. So you could read the story there.
Ken, you do all kinds of things in all kinds of ways, and you are a rock star. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. Next week is Hannah Batzel. So we are excited to host her next week. See you later.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Evanston Bound with Ken Gerleve. If you have more interest in viewing his work, you can visit his website at kennethgerleve.com. And if you wouldn't mind heading over to our website, artistbookhouse.org/donate, you can throw a few bucks our way to help continue with this great programming. Thank you so much.